Welcome, everyone. My name is Shoshana Mostoller, and I'm the Director of Programs for My Dog is My Home. I would love to introduce you to our speakers today, Loney, Christina Garcia, and Aidan McMorrow. Lauren has more than 7 years of experience crafting policies and lobbying on a variety of issues at the local, state, and federal levels. She was the Texas State Director for the Humane Society of the United States, where she successfully worked to pass ordinances in Houston and Dallas, banning the retail sale of puppies and kittens in pet stores, and led state legislative efforts on a variety of policies, including public contact with dangerous wild animals and pets in rental housing. Lauren previously worked in affordable housing and environmental justice movements and now works to undo the traditional siloing of human and animal policy advocacy efforts. She received her BS in Fisheries and Wildlife Biology from Mizzou and her MS in Aquatic Resources from Texas State University. And she graduated with honors from the University of Texas School of Law in 2017, where she was on the executive boards of the Animal Law and Environmental Law Societies. Lauren recently moved to Southeast Alaska with her partner Michael and their 3 dogs, Daffodil, Saya, and Marshall. I'd also like to welcome Christina Garcia. She's a dedicated leader in housing justice, homelessness prevention, and community advocacy. Christina's passion for this work is deeply personal, shaped by her lived experience with homelessness and housing instability. As Chief Program Officer at the Community Economic Defense Project, she oversees large-scale housing and supportive service programs, leveraging over 12 years of expertise in federal, state, and local housing initiatives. She currently serves on the boards of the Metro Denver Homelessness Initiative, the Community Investment Alliance, the Adelante Mujer Incorporated, the Denver Latino Commission, and the Colorado Governor's Community Corrections Advisory Council. She also previously served as Vice President of the National Coalition for the Homeless from 2022 to 2024. Aidan McMorrow is an animal welfare advocacy professional with a passion for community veterinary services and humane education. He has organized hundreds of high-volume vaccine clinics, assisted in writing public health policies for co-sheltering facilities, and testified in legislative hearings in support of progressive animal welfare legislation. Aidan also currently supervises the Denver Animal Protection Community Engagement Program, an extensive program that provides free veterinary services to pet owners and connects with Denver residents to promote best practices, including humane education presentations in classrooms and presentations with registered neighborhood organizations. In his free time, Aidan enjoys hiking, spending too much money on vinyls, and hanging out with his cats, Codaline and Taro. Today's session is called Keeping Families Housed and Together, Denver's Pet Deposit Assistance Program. Pilot, sorry. As housing costs rise, pet-related fees and deposits can become a critical barrier to stable housing, often forcing families to choose between keeping their home or their companion animal. In response, the City of Denver launched an innovative pilot program providing up to $300 in financial assistance to help renters cover pet deposits and related costs. Administered in partnership with the Community Economic Defense Project and evaluated by the University of Denver's Institute for Human-Animal Connection, the initiative aims to prevent pet relinquishment and support housing stability. This session is going to explore the design, implementation, and early lessons from the pilot, including how public funding streams can be leveraged to keep people and pets together. So Lauren is going to go ahead and she's already shared her slides, and she's going to go ahead and start the presentation.
Thank you so much, Shoshana, for that introduction. And I'm really excited to be here with my 2 co-panelists. So we are going to hop right into some brief introductions from our panelists. So Christina, you want to kick us off with intros?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Christina Garcia here. I use she, her pronouns, and as mentioned, Chief Program Officer for the Community Economic Defense Project.
Hey everybody, my name's Aidan McMorrow, using he, him pronouns, and I am the Community Engagement Administrator here at Denver Animal Shelter.
And I'm Loney, using she, her pronouns, and I founded an organization called Shared Home Project, and have been working in the pets and housing space in legislative and research since about 2020. So this is Shared Home Projects First, really deep dive into a highly collaborative program. So it's kind of a case study for this work, and we're really excited to share our process and how this program has evolved from start to finish. So launching right in, we're gonna split this presentation up into basically 5 different parts to really help set the stage for how this program originated, all the way, the lessons learned and steps we've taken along the way to evolve. And then by the end, sharing some initial results and findings from this program and some, just some thoughts about that we all have shared about how this program has functioned and it will continue to function and what we can learn from it if other folks are interested in advocating for their own municipally funded pet deposit program. So this program really started, the origin of this program is predates Shared Home Project's involvement and really launched with this multi-stakeholder engagement with a local lawmaker, local council member Chris Hines in the city of Denver. So Animal Policy Group, who is a Shared Home Project client, has a within their network, they have their a pets and housing project within the Animal Policy Group network. This group, although they are from a variety of industries and advocacy focuses, they have a shared mission to increasing pet inclusive housing for tenants with pets. And this group actually brought some experience to the table because they successfully advocated for another municipally funded pet deposit pilot program in San Antonio, Texas. That program has not yet launched, making the Denver pilot program, to our knowledge, the first municipally funded pet deposit program to have officially launched in the U.S. And this group worked with council member Chris Hines, as I mentioned, because of his really wonderful commitment to this issue. But he has this ideal combination of interest and experience in his community related to both pet issues and housing issues. He has robust existing connections with local animal rescues, including serving on the board of what's now called Colorado Humane. And also is a well-known tenants' rights and affordable housing advocate. In addition to that, District 10, Councilmember Hines' district, contains the highest density of subsidized rental housing in the city of Denver. So Councilmember Hines was sort of this made a lot of sense for this group to approach Councilmember Hines about his interest in doing pets and housing related advocacy or programmatic work. The other thing I want to point out that made Denver in particular an ideal setting for this type of pilot is that in 2023, the Colorado legislature passed House Bill 1068. That bill, in addition to doing several other things, capped pet deposits at $300, required those deposits to be refundable, not defundable, and required pet deposits to be $300 per lease and not per pet. So in this instance, we had a really solid idea of the maximum amount that a tenant can be charged for a pet deposit, which is not the case in other jurisdictions where there are no caps on deposit amounts. So we started with a program budget of, sort of at the baseline level is about $41,000. That's what Councilmember Hines was willing to commit from his discretionary budget to launch this program. And so it's important to note that this funding did come from Councilmember Hines' discretionary funds, not from an appropriation, an appropriation from the city or from the state. So that program budget breaks down to $30,000 for pet deposits. So we estimate being able to serve about 100 families, about $7,500 for administrative costs. That covers both program development and implementation. And then another $3,500 as needed for pet licensing. And it's important to note, and I'm going to pop over to Christina in a second, that This administrative cost does not fully cover staff time for either myself or the staff at Community Economic Defense Project. So, Christina, do you want to give us a little bit of insight into, how you are calculating staff time and at CEDP?
Sure. So the way that the administrative costs break out for us is about $20 per payment that is processed. And our staff time, to Lauren's point, costs way more than that. Would say about like $30 to $50 per hour, depending on the complexity of the situation. And yet, I just want to be clear that even though we are pretty much like coming out of pocket to support this program, we thought it was really important just because of how mission aligned it is with our organization. But we just wanted to make it super clear that although the administrative costs that are, reflected on this slide can seem as if it is, a lot of money. It really isn't truly covering the cost of the administration of the program, and want folks to consider that when they're thinking about setting up their own programs.
Thanks, Christina. And then in addition to the pet deposit work, from the get-go, the council member Hines wanted to include Denver Animal Shelter, Denver Animal Protection in this program to provide additional pet-related resources for the applicants in this pilot program. So each applicant is offered veterinary care related expenses, pet licensing if they so choose, and additional resources through Aidan's work at Denver Animal Shelter. Aidan, is there anything you want to add about the actual costs to Denver Animal Shelter? I know it's a little difficult to sort of nail down some of those costs, but it's important to note that Denver Animal Shelter is also not having their administrative costs covered through this pilot program.
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, it's hard to nail down the exact costs given that we're not marking up a lot of the free services that we would provide to community members, but we do have our clinic team on standby to assist with this, and we're factoring in the veterinarian's time, the tech's time, and those are sort of the easier things. But then going down to each surgical pack that we use, the food and the kennel space that an animal will need while they're here, there are a lot of different things to factor in. One thing that has been helpful through our organization is our community engagement program already offering a lot of these services. So we typically do have owned animals coming through here for care. So this was similar to how we would incorporate a lot of those pets into the flow of our veterinary clinic. And I'll get into some details about what that program looks like a little bit further on in the presentation.
Thanks, Aidan. So we really just wanted to be very transparent with y'all about the costs that are not covered by this program, this pilot program, while also emphasizing that each of us are so committed to seeing this pilot program through that we all felt like it was worth it to participate in this pilot program despite the program budget not covering necessarily all of these administrative costs, so that we can not only provide these resources to Denver residents, but also be able to evaluate the effectiveness of this type of program and see if it's replicable in other places. So for the pet deposit program, one of the first things that we had to do was identify our eligibility guidelines. And I'll get into the timeline in a second, but this is really where Shared Home Project came into the picture, was to help develop the programmatic pieces of this pilot. So from the get-go, we knew we wanted this to be very low barrier. And so we have only two eligibility requirements to participate, to receive a pet deposit. One is that the applicant must be using the pet deposit for a rental home located in District 10. of the city of Denver. That geographic limitation comes from the fact that Councilmember Hines funded this pilot program with his discretionary funds, and so wants this program to be a District 10 pilot. The second eligibility guideline we decided is that applicants needed to have an existing pet that they were at risk of rehoming or relinquishing if they didn't get this assistance. So juxtapose that with the alternative, which could be getting a pet deposit for acquiring a new pet, i.e., to increase shelter adoptions or something like that. But we were really wanting to focus on relinquishment prevention and pet deposits as a relinquishment diversion tool. So the second phase of this was really, I want to share with you guys sort of the initial workflow that we envisioned. So Councilmember Hines obviously is the funder for this program. His office also committed to leading the advertising and media relations for this program. We did have quite a large media push right when this program was launched. At the very beginning of this year. And his office has the staff on board. They contract with a media relations team to really help lead and take a lot of that work on. Shared Home Project was hired as the program consultant early on to develop the program framework, so those eligibility guidelines, develop the workflow and procedures for how the pet deposits would get from the pilot program into the hands of the housing providers or tenants. Create all the applications. So we created applications for this program in both English and Spanish. And Shared Home Project had the responsibility of community engagement. And so it was during this time, in this initial phase of the work, that I first connected with Community Economic Defense Project to get their feedback about the program, see if they might be interested in helping to recruit or provide advertisement for this resource to their clients and their network, and otherwise make sure that this was the type of program that was fitting within their vision of community engagement as well. It was really important for us early on that this pilot program be additive to the work already going on in the community. At this point, we also envisioned that myself at Shared Home Project would receive and review all the applications, distribute all the pet deposits, and refer applicants to DAS all internally. And then, as I mentioned before, from the very beginning, Councilmember Hines had approached Denver Animal Services to make this sort of a dual resource program, right? Provide the housing related funds, but also make sure that folks had what they needed for their pets. And so at that time, DAS committed to helping to advertise for the program, sort of let the folks coming in through their network know of the program's existence. And then, of course, work with clients on the other end of the program to help meet their pet-related needs, including spays and neuters, licenses, vaccines, etc. And so I want to turn it over to Aidan now to share why DAS really wanted to participate in this program and sort of take on this extra work to sort of participate in this pilot program.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so here at Denver Animal Shelter, we have a really cool, very progressive community engagement program that already provides a lot of services to owned animals in our community. This includes free spay-neuter services to pet owners that need that extra support, vaccine clinics, and we actually do mobile vaccine clinics too, where we're out at some of the transitional housing facilities around town, giving people free vaccines, brief exams, microchips. And it was really kind of a no-brainer for us when we were approached by Lauren and Councilman Hines about this program, because it's really another barrier that we have a lot of clients who are dealing with. So if this is something that we can break that barrier down and give people another thing that they don't have to worry about when it comes to keeping their pet and their family, that was something that we were immediately going to do. A big thing that we're used to too is kind of meeting people where they're at. And I think there's the physical version of that, which is represented in our mobile services, but there's also what people want in the moment. And when it comes to veterinary care, sometimes somebody might be ready to get some vaccines, but spay and neuter might be a conversation that we're having a little bit down the line. So I think working with clients who have different needs and giving them that sort of support is something that really goes in line with the program that we already have here. So incorporating these folks onto that list, getting them in for these services, was a no-brainer for us. We're looking forward to continuing working on this program. We're still getting applicants. Lauren sent me one the other day. I think yesterday we got another one. So yeah, we're going to continue coordinating these services and just really excited to be a part of this. We work with a lot of people that are dealing with some serious housing insecurity, and there's already so many things that need to be factored in. So having the pet deposit be one less thing for folks to worry about is a huge win, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Aidan. And one more thing I'll add, I mean, DAS's community engagement program is already such an incredible resource. And then one more thing that I'll add is that there's some research to suggest that using taxpayer dollars to pay for upstream resources like a pet deposit that may end up keeping a pet from coming into the shelter is ultimately a more efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So it costs less to help provide the resources that people need to keep their pets in their home than it does to pay for a pet that has been relinquished, pay for that pet's care, all that pet's food, and then ultimately the time and resources it takes to hopefully eventually get that pet adopted out into a new home. So this was a great opportunity to test that hypothesis. Is it more efficient for us to use taxpayer dollars to provide pet deposit assistance sort of upstream relative to what the shelter is spending, to deal with these downstream consequences? Which is that type of research and understanding that dynamic is a big gap in sort of our understanding of how these programs function and ultimately benefit the community more broadly. So I want to pause here for just a couple of early educational opportunities that I had the opportunity to sort of help our stakeholders start to understand about low barrier services, and also just a couple of quick lessons learned from this early stage. So there were these first three items: no income restrictions or proof of income required. We offer but don't require pet licensure, and ensuring that the pet deposit refund, if a tenant gets one, goes back to the tenant and not back to the city. These are three items that we really had to go through a lot of discussion with the council member and other city staff. So I think a lot of us, probably most of us in this space, if you have been involved in supportive services, proof of income and having income restrictions is in itself a barrier to access to a program, and unfortunately can end up disincentivizing people from applying for a program, not because they make too much income, quote unquote, too much income, but because showing proof of income comes with a lot of vulnerability and can create even the ability to access statements in bank statements or income W-2s or things like that, tax statements in a short turnaround time. So can be a huge barrier to applicants. So we really pushed hard to not have income restrictions and not require proof of income. We trust that those who need assistance in our community are going to apply for it, and those who do not need assistance are not going to apply for it. And that bears out in the research, in supportive services research across all different types of programs. We also, initially, there was a request that we required pet licensure in order to get the pet deposit. I pushed back on that requirement for two reasons. Number one, that can take a long time, and often people need these pet deposits in a very short turnaround time. So that would create a barrier that would be very difficult to overcome logistically. Second, we are living in a time when many people, many of the most vulnerable people in our community, are including immigrant families, are not feeling very safe to approach any facet of our government. And we didn't want to discourage people from applying for this program because they would need to go submit all of their information to yet another government program. So we offer but do not require pet licensure as part of receiving this assistance. We also had some discussion about whether or not the pet deposit, if there was a refund, could go back to the city as opposed to going back to the tenant. The argument being that if the refund goes back to the city, then that could create, in the long term, a sort of self-sustaining pot of money to then issue new pet deposits from. There are some programs that have that structure. We chose to not go that route for this pilot program. One, there's just logistics issues. Who's going to be in charge of getting that money back from the landlords or tenants a year, 2, 3 years down the line when that tenant leaves their living situation? So there's just some logistic issues for that to be a pilot program process. But in addition to that, and perhaps more importantly, the hope is that this pet deposit can create some additional stability for tenants, even if they move to a new location. So while there are a lot of issues with pet deposits not being refunded as legally required, the idea is that if somebody gets their pet deposit back, they will then have those funds to use in their next apartment, next rental housing. The fourth item I want to point out here is that if this is your first time contracting with a municipality, I would just suggest being prepared for a long timeline from initial conversations to launch. In this case, it took about 1.5 years for this pilot to go from those origin conversations to actually shared home project and CEDP getting the funds. One big lesson for me is it's important to understand the infrastructure needed to effectively and timely deliver deposits. We're going to get into that in a minute, but it's not nearly as simple as just calling up a housing provider and saying, hey, I want to give you X amount of dollars to cover the deposit for this person. It's a little bit more involved than that. And then finally, this is, I think, especially important from our perspective as contracting with a municipality. Understand the contractual requirements with the city that you want to engage with and ensure your ability to subcontract. That's a really important component of our program here. So I won't, every city is going to be different, but one big thing that, nonprofits, organizations have to have if you're contracting with the city is a liability insurance policy, for example, covering up to a certain amount of damages. So just be prepared that there might be some extra contractual requirements if you want to contract with a municipality. So the next phase of this program really came about whenever I approached Community Economic Defense Project and Christina to become official community partners, our community housing partner in this work. So as you might remember, they had already known about the program, were supportive of the program, and were going to help advertise for the program. But at this point, I approached Christina and her team to become official partners because I realized that in my own consultancy, I was not equipped to do deposits quickly. And that especially came about whenever I moved to Southeast Alaska and realized that it would be difficult for me to quickly get funds delivered to a Denver area housing provider. So I really was excited to approach Community Economic Defense Project about joining us. And these are just some of the reasons why I thought CEDP would be just the perfect partner if they had the capacity, which I wasn't sure of at the time. And also just some things for other folks on the call. If you're interested in developing an official partnership with a housing advocacy organization in your community, these are some things to sort of keep in mind. So, as I already mentioned, CEDP had the existing deposit and rental assistance infrastructure. That meant that CEDP already had the infrastructure in place to manage the paperwork that comes along with doing deposits. And actually, in the case of CEDP, they often already had the EFT information and the tax information for the housing providers, the landlords that we are providing deposits to. So that infrastructure, that existing understanding of what what that deposit assistance looks like is so key to making this program successful. CEDP is also a very trusted community partner. And I mean that for both tenants and also in the context of communicating with landlords. So I have found that when I'm speaking with landlords, it's much easier to coordinate with them when I mention that I'm working with CEDP and they're already really familiar with CEDP and are used to receiving funds from them. So all of a sudden, that conversation gets a lot easier and smoother when I'm not having to try and explain who I am. CDP is also, of course, trusted by other tenants groups who may refer clients to the program. And we're going to share a little bit about how we've been engaging with some of those groups and in the next couple of slides. CDP was also willing to try something new and partner with not only myself, but Denver Animal Shelter, and was willing and had the capacity to go through the trial and error process to develop the workflow that we now use today. And one thing I really want to point out on this slide is, and this is not just in this context, but in all contexts, I really encourage animal welfare folks to build relationships with your housing partners before making any sort of ask. Get to know these groups, ask how you can support them. And then when you go to ask if they want to partner on something like a pilot program like this one, it's a much more natural process. And, we don't want our relationships as animal welfare with our housing partners to be transactional. They need to be deeper and more mutually beneficial. And then finally, it was clear from my first conversation with CEDP that there was just this inherent understanding of the issues stemming from lack of access to pet inclusive housing and this shared commitment to keeping families whole, and that includes people's pets. So there was this existing sort of mutual understanding of the importance of this type of program. So, Christina, I'd love to turn it over to you to share a bit more about why y'all decided to take the leap and become an official partner of this program.
Thank you. Yeah, so when Lauren approached CDP about partnering on this pilot, it immediately resonated with our mission. At CDP, our work is focused on keeping people housed and preventing homelessness across Colorado. Since our founding, we've built programs that combine legal support, housing counseling, financial assistance, and other supportive services that address the real barriers that push families out of housing. One thing that we see consistently is that even what we would consider a small financial barrier can have tremendous consequences. And so pet deposits are a great example of that. Many families that rely on pets for emotional support and companionship have barriers when they're trying to secure housing, as we've talked about. And these additional deposits make the difference between them being able to keep their pet or needing to surrender them. So we already operate one of the largest homelessness prevention programs in the state of Colorado. In the 6 years of our existence, we've dispersed over $280 million of financial assistance, and we're able to quickly move funds throughout the state. We're set up in various different offices across the state, but also our payment infrastructure allows us to print checks quickly as soon as we get all of the documentation that proves folks' eligibility for the programs. And so this was just like a natural connection here, especially because of how challenging it is to get folks into housing and how competitive that is. And so having folks have the pet deposit readily available so that they can compete with other market rate tenants and securing housing was really important. And so the way this partnership works is that Lauren is the one that handles the applications and the client engagement, and then uses our established system to deliver the funds to landlords. And this allows the pilot to focus on its core goal, which is keeping families housed while keeping their pets.
Yeah. Thanks, Christina. And I think that there's also so much that I've learned working with Christina and her staff about, Christina mentioned the community engagement or the client engagement. That's another huge benefit to this partnership from my end, is that Christina's staff are so well versed and so experienced with client engagement. And so as somebody who is less experienced and less well versed in those processes, sort of best practices, I'm really also getting the chance to learn a lot from my housing colleagues on in this partnership. And so it truly has been this pilot program would not be what it is if we were not partnering with Community Economic Defense Project. And I cannot emphasize that enough. And if that's one thing that folks take away from this talk, I hope that is it, is that we are better whenever we're working together towards these shared goals and sharing expertise, right? We all bring different things to the table. So just to visualize a little bit more how Christina just described the program, the current program flow. So we use Google Forms to do our application. So we have an online application through Google Forms. I am the recipient of all the applications. So I receive and review all the applications to identify whether these applicants are eligible. Do they meet those two criteria? And also to look and see what they identify in their application as other pet care needs. So in the application, we have questions not only about their housing status, what type of housing they live in, but also what resources could this applicant use in addition to pet deposit assistance. That's both human-related resources and also additional and other pet-related resources. So we want to try and, through this application, understand sort of the whole picture, at least as much as you can get through a multiple choice application, what types of needs each applicant has. So after I identify eligible applicants, two steps happen. I send CEDP all the applicant information, but most importantly, the landlord information. So CEDP then reviews that information I send them to determine if they already have or need payment information and their tax documents. At the same time, I also notify eligible tenants of their successful application. And I specifically ask in an email or text, if they select text as their primary or phone as their primary communication source or option, I ask that tenant if the pet is on the lease already and get consent to reach out to their landlord to start this process. We'll go into that in a little bit, but I found that it's really important to just have that initial contact before reaching out to the landlord. Christina, would you mind sharing, just for folks who might not know, what kind of payment information and like what's the purpose of obviously collecting the payment info, but what are the types of payment information that you might collect? And then also the purpose of collecting the W-9s.
Yeah, so for the W-9, we're required to issue a 1099 at the end of the year if payments exceed a certain threshold. Don't quiz me on the amount right now. I feel like it's $600 a year, but I could be wrong. And the payment info, we would love to be able to deposit the funds electronically for folks to ensure that it gets there immediately. But if a landlord prefers a check or actually the owner wants it to go to the property manager instead, then we follow that preference. So it's just making sure that we're doing whatever is in the best interest of getting the payment to the landlord as quickly as possible to maintain the competitiveness of that applicant for that unit.
Absolutely. And being flexible is definitely a big part of that. Thanks, Christina. And so after I get consent to reach out to the landlord, Community Economic Defense Project lets me know what additional information they need. Then it comes back to me to reach out to that landlord, get any additional payment or tax documentation CEDP needs on their end, confirm the pet deposit amount. That's going to be especially important for folks who don't live in places where pet deposits are regulated. And then confirm the information that the landlord wants us to include with the payment. So oftentimes landlords are asking for us to include in the memo section, the last name of the tenant, the unit they live in, and that this is for a pet deposit. That way, when they receive it, they can really quickly apply it to that tenant's account. Once all of that information on my end is taken care of, I give the green light to pay the pet deposit. Then Community Economic Defense Project staff takes care of making that payment, whether it's ACH, so a direct deposit, or mailing that check. And one really amazing thing about working with CEDP, Christina touched on this earlier, is that those checks can literally be delivered on the same day if we get our timing right. And that's just simply not something that most of us have the ability to do unless you can drive a check over to a housing provider's address. Once all that is taken care of, I then check in with the tenant about the pet-related needs that they indicated in their application, get consent for me to connect them to Aidan over at Denver Animal Shelter. And then I send an email connecting Aidan and the tenant to coordinate that pet care and supply provision that the tenant identifies in their application. So this is really just sort of a flow chart of our program design as it currently exists. I also want to note that we expanded our advertising strategies to include flyers in District 10 in both Spanish and English, and collaboration with the Denver Metro Tenants Union, who's also, thanks to CEDP's connections, excited about this project and very interested in making sure that their network of tenants knows that it's available. In the last couple of minutes, and then we'll get to questions, I just want to share some really high-level initial results and findings. So we've really only been functional since January of this year. We've had 31 total applicants, but only 4 of those applicants have been eligible based on geographic restrictions. So we've provided 2 pet deposits. One of our applicants actually ended up needing an emotional support animal letter because of their housing situation. And a 4th applicant ended up needing to be connected to CEDP's Veterans Assistance Program to help with housing navigation, to help him find housing where he could use his voucher. So we still have only provided a couple of pet deposits. We're still in our infancy, but we're learning a lot from the applications. Notably, Five of our applicants have received housing choice vouchers and have been able to successfully, but with some struggle, find housing that accepts their pets. About 60% of our applicants live in multifamily housing versus single-family homes. And about 65% also pay pet rent. And that includes all but one of our 8 applicants that are living in subsidized housing. It's really important when we're talking about pet rent to not forget that even subsidized housing providers are charging pet rent, which is something that at Shared Home Project we absolutely oppose. A couple of other notes. So 44% of our applicants are employed full time. So their source of income is W-2 or self-employment. And then about a third receive Social Security or disability income. And I want to combine that data point with this red arrow here on the bottom chart showing that nobody in our applicant pool makes above $70,000 a year. We got some pretty strong pushback from some very vocal Denver residents about how, since we didn't have income restrictions, we were going to have people from Cherry Hill, which is a very wealthy part of Denver, applying to receive this type of funding. Or we were going to have people who just don't work because they don't want to, because we're not requiring proof of income applying for this funding. And I just want to show, probably all of us in this space know this to be true, but I think it's really important to collect this kind of data when you're doing a new program like this so that you have these talking points to push back against the naysayers that are inevitably going to come out in the community. I also want to note on this slide that a huge percentage of these applicants had other needs for their pets related to veterinary care, pet food, or supplies. And more than a third also identified needing human-related supplies, food, or medical or dental care. And this is where I really want to call out that this data is really supporting those organizations, including Annie and Millie's Place, which is also based in Colorado. I'm on the board of Annie and Millie's, and I know Kristen and Cliff are on the call. So shout out to how Annie and Millie's Place is implementing these One Health clinics, where folks can come to these clinics. They can receive pet-related care and supplies, as well as dental appointments, check-ins with medical professionals, school supplies, all sorts of other human-related needs. And I think this data really supports this burgeoning movement of these One Health style clinics and programs, and something that I would love to see this type of pilot program grow into as well, to really be, a 360 support system for the applicants. Finally, just a little bit about the pets that have applied. So we've had 8 cats and 12 dogs that have been in the applicant pool. Lots of different types of breeds, but my favorite is an applicant who identified their dog as a small, shaggy, white ankle biter. I thought that was really funny. And then you can see that pet ages vary greatly. And actually that a vast majority of, or most of the dogs in our data set here are small dogs, indicating that it's, this financial issue is impacting people, even if they don't have big, blocky-headed dogs. And then finally, some quick lessons learned. I won't read through all of these, but the big thing that I want to note is we still have a lot to learn about how to make this program as successful as possible. So we're still in early stages and are always looking for ways to improve our process and also make sure we're reaching as many people as possible. And I want to end with, we have just one applicant who has allowed us to share a picture of their cat, Momo. This was an applicant who received our first pet deposit, and he adopted Momo from the shelter. And Momo is playing a huge role in this applicant's life. And although most of these other pet names listed on the right here, we weren't able to serve them because of the geographic limitations, primarily in our eligibility guidelines. these are all pets who are part of somebody's family, and these families are so attached and they love these pets so much that they were willing to take a chance and reach out to us in this pilot program. And we really hope to grow this program, maybe see a next iteration of it not have geographic restrictions so that we can make sure that all of these families get this type of resource. So with that, I know I'm a couple minutes over time. We are happy to take questions. I just want to thank all the different stakeholders who have been involved and will continue to be involved in this program. And if anybody has questions, here's our contact information on the left.
Thank you so much, Lauren, Christina, and Aidan. We do have some questions that I'm going to read out. I do want to, before we start with the questions, I just really want to commend you guys on the 3 organizations working together so well. You know, I did work for an animal shelter that started a program similar to this, but we tried to do it on our own, and we really did come up with some challenges that we didn't expect in terms of getting the deposits out in a timely manner and having that the payment aspect of it. So I can see how it's so helpful for you to be able to partner with Christina's agency. And I also love the point that you brought up about upstream funding versus downstream funding. There's another session that's going on right now, so I encourage everyone to go back and watch it when you get a chance. But it's specifically the Massachusetts SPCA has a housing policy specialist that is employed by the shelter. And, you know, in the past 3 years, they have spent over $1 million on owner surrender specifically from housing. So you can see how the outcome from funding, you know, in terms of cost can be so much more with dealing with it on the other side versus preventing it to begin with. And so I really appreciated that point that you brought up. So I'm going to just look at the questions that were submitted. We got some really good questions. One was about opposition, which you did mention a little bit about some of the opposition that you got. So they said, what opposition exists and what barriers or facilitators to change were evident? And I am wondering about specifically barriers. So I'm going to add on to their question a little bit, because one thing that we did see from your slides was that there were 30 plus applications, but much fewer deposits actually given out. So I guess the 2 parts of that question are, you know, opposition, if you want to expand on the opposition, and then also what barriers maybe led to fewer deposits being actually given.
Yeah. Well, the opposition was really straightforward. And I think in some ways might have stemmed from the city of Denver has had some budgetary issues in the past year. So I think the idea of budget and spending is already kind of a hot topic in the city. But the idea is that taxpayer dollars should not be spent on this. And so we're very fortunate that our council member and Aidan's organization we're not at all susceptible to that kind of opposition. So it really was that opposition was never actually a barrier to getting the program started. It's just something we had to navigate as the program was launching and it was getting a bunch of media attention. But our response to that was simply to point out that your taxpayer dollars are already going to fund the animal shelter. Right. So those monies are being used to pay for the consequences of this issue. And then we would point out some of the research, although we need more, about the cost-effective nature of upstream. So really, this is actually, in theory, we need to analyze this data still, more effective use of taxpayer dollars. So that's kind of how we responded to it. But we're just very fortunate. DAS and Councilmember Hines were just like not concerned by that kind of pushback. And then I think, you know, Christina, you know, you also work on other deposit related topics, so you might have an expanded answer. But from my review of the applicant pool, the geographic limitation is the #1 barrier. We are having applicants from all over the city. And District 10 is quite a small district. It's dense. It's right in the middle, you know, it's right downtown. So that's hands down the biggest barrier. And that's a program design choice. right? So.
Well, it also seems like that kind of just reinforces how needed these types of programs are, right? That you're still getting all these applications that they're just from other
Yeah.
places. So we have about 5 more minutes. So let's see
Yeah.
what questions that we can get in 5 minutes. So the next question is, following HB 231068, did you find any landlords actually ended up raising their deposits or implementing or raising pet rents?
That's a great question. I don't have any evidence of that. I will say when you look at like Zillow or apartments.com now, it's super consistent across the board. Um, but we didn't have enough baseline data to do a before and after analysis of that type of question.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. So one question is, who is the most affected? Seniors, low income, and how and why, and how and what changes are advocates seeking? So how does power operate within this policy space? Who benefits from the status quo and not implementing such programs? So that's a lot. That's a lot there.
I know I need to see that in writing.
Yeah, no, for
Um,
sure.
So, I think that who benefits? I think that the data is supporting that certainly from a relinquishment side. Most pet relinquishments are coming from more vulnerable communities using like social vulnerability index as your metric. So lower income communities, communities or parts of communities that are more more proportions of people of color who are, of course, subject to all these systemic issues, making them more vulnerable to having to give up a pet. So we know from a relinquishment side of the data that most relinquishments are coming from more vulnerable populations who are more likely to be experiencing housing insecurity and financial barriers to accessing housing among access barriers to accessing many other types of resources. We don't have enough data for this program. We're not collecting the ages of the applicants. So I don't know in this program that we are going to be able to see that type of like, is it mostly seniors? Is it not? That type of demographic data. We have I would say approximately 50-50 split in our applicants between applicants who are self-identifying as white and applicants who are self-identifying as non-white, so people of color. And of course, that's broken. There's many different options for self-identifying race and ethnicity in the application. But at this point, with the pet deposit program itself, we don't have enough data to really talk about trends. Christina, I don't know if you want to, if you have more traditional security deposit data that might be useful to help add to that.
Not necessarily that would be relatable to this program. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I
And
would,
then oh, go ahead, Aidan.
oh yeah, I mean, I would add just separately, working with folks through our larger community engagement program, we definitely are serving people that come from a specific set of zip codes, all living in a veterinary resource desert. So folks that historically haven't had access to a relationship with a veterinarian. And I would bet that as this continues, we would see a lot of overlap there.
Thank you again, Lauren, Aidan, and Christina, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
here, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Chasing the night away, never judging.